Hear these words from Luke chapter 8. When they had arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee, he stepped out on land, and a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice,
"What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me."
For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds.
Jesus then asked him,
"What is your name?"
He said,
"Legion."
For many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now, there on the hillside, a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these, so he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned.
When the swineherds saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid.
Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying,
"Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you."
So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him.
Here ends the reading.
Y'all heard that story before? That's a goofy story, isn't it? That is a real strange story. So, let's do an equally strange sermon, shall we? We have been looking at healing stories, and this is obviously one of those healing stories that we've been kind of gathering this particular month to talk about how it is that we are healing and how we are healed. Because the healing stories of Jesus, they always served a specific purpose. Jesus didn't just walk around zapping people because of their situation. He felt sorry for people, wanted to make them happy, at the same time making him look good. He was no Benny Hinn. But what we need to see about these particular healing stories is that healing and faith in all of these stories are always closely linked together. And they're not really expanded upon in the stories, but they're things in the stories that you pull out. The people that Jesus that healed really understood who Jesus was, far more than the religious leaders of his day and time. So they understood who he was. But they also believed that they were not created to suffer. But they also were very, very persistent in trying to be in the presence of Jesus. Many times Jesus would just ignore them, and they would follow him along everywhere he went, but they were just persistent in that. And when Jesus would turn to heal them, they would respond in an appropriate manner. They would respond with sheer joy, great enthusiasm that could not be contained, and they went about telling people about the great acts of Jesus Christ. While the emphasis on healing has always been in the physical, such as restoring sight to the blind, voice to the mute, and even legs to the cripple, the greater miracle that was taking place was removing the stigma that was attached to such disabilities. A disability of any kind was just simply explained as God's punishment to people. Therefore, to be healed was to remove that stigma And then that person was viewed by the community and the world around them as someone who had been forgiven by God, and their life had now been restored back into the community of faith in the world in which they live. So, it's difficult for us to really imagine what it's like to have that stigma. And so healing stories don't have impact on us. It's difficult for us to kind of understand what it'd be like to be completely detached from your family, completely cut off, and to be completely cut off from your friends, and to be completely cut off from your work, and to be completely cut off from your church. That is something that we do not understand, is to have all of these things taken away from us simply because there's something out of our control, as our voices don't work, our eyes don't work, and our legs don't work. We don't live in a society like that, so we just assume that being healed in these stories is just strictly physical. But physical healing is nothing compared to what we go through when our souls are healed, which is the response of the people in the story. Not being able to use certain parts of our bodies appropriately can be inconvenience at the best. But not being able to function the way that God created us to function because we've never been forgiven, because never in our life have we ever experienced unconditional love, that we've never been cared for. That's the real tragedy that's taking place in our story. And real healing is when we remove those obstacles that prevent us from seeing what God is capable of doing through us. Recently read where a soldier came back from overseas. He stepped on a landmine in Iraq and is paralyzed, waist down. Can't imagine what he was going through physically, right? Mentally, emotionally, psychologically. His life is completely changed just by one single step. A lot of therapy, a lot of work, a lot of talking, a lot of praying. A lot of people prayed for him to be healed, to walk again. And then out of some strange thing, one day it just seemed to happen. Suddenly, just like that, he was healed. It was a miracle. And he said to the people, when I had full use of my legs, I could do 10,000 things. But now that I'm paralyzed, I can only do 9,000 things. That's healing. It is seeing our value, the gifts, our abilities that God gave us regardless of our situation in life. Right? What caused Paul to sing in prison while being flogged and chained? One of the reasons that Jesus was crucified was that he was doing things that the church leaders said that only God can do, and that was to heal, to forgive, and to offer new life to people of faith that the church had already condemned, right? So today's reading, this strange story, Jesus has taken it even a step further into a whole new realm of controversy. Because now he is choosing to heal and to forgive and restore a person outside of the faith. That's just something you do not do. It's hard enough to get away with doing things with people within the faith who have already been condemned by the church, but now Jesus is stepping outside into hostile territory and offering new life to those outside the church, outside the faith. Because the bottom line is this: Jesus is not partial to people, period. The good news of Jesus Christ is always the good news. It's the good news to all of humanity. It doesn't matter who they are. Jesus longed for everyone to understand how much God loved them, period. That's the way it should be. That is the way that we should be. In our story, it's kind of an interesting story. Jesus crossed a major line, and the line is pretty easy to see. You see that map in front of you, behind me, in front of me, in front of you, behind you. There's a line, you can see it right down there, right? And the line that's made is the River Jordan, right down the land. And then up on the top part of that is a little circle, which is the Sea of Galilee, and then the Dead Sea is on the lower circle. So you have Sea of Galilee, the River Jordan, and then the Dead Sea. Everything on the left of that, that's where the good people lived, right? Anything on the, let me see if I got it right. On the right of that, that's where the hostiles lived. You didn't cross that line. You stayed on your side. This is the people God loved is on the left. The people God did not love is on the right. So you never crossed that line. So here's a story of Jesus constantly going back and forth. This is one thing I like about Luke's gospel. Jesus is always in the boat. I like boats. And he's always crossing the sea. He goes from the good side to the bad side. Does stuff at the bad side. Goes to the good side. Does stuff on the good side. Goes to the bad side. You see what he's doing? So he's constantly going back and forth, sending a message to the church very loudly that Jesus is concerned for both those on the left and also those on the right. Maybe he's here to help us politically. But the point is this. Jesus gets in the boat for the first time in this story. And he goes to the other side into the Gentile territory. And so for the first time, this is making a huge statement to the church, okay? So there's a lot of red flags going on here. So the first one is this. Jesus is in Gentile territory. It was an unclean act. And when he steps foot on Gentile ground, the first thing that he sees is a person who is running at him who is a man who is what? Naked. All right? I don't know if that's against the law, but if I'm in that boat getting off the first time, and the first thing I see is a naked man running at me, okay, I'm just saying that's a red flag, okay? And there's only one thing worse than a naked man running at you. And that's a naked man who's running at you who's possessed with demons. Visualize this, people. Okay? So we're seeing this act taking place. You see, in those worlds, that's how things were explained. If you couldn't explain things, it's just a world that's full of demons. And demons are just trying to just attach yourself to you. So you always had to protect yourself from these demons. Well, obviously, this guy didn't do a good job. But it also explains why he's probably naked. It's because he is possessed with demons. So that's another thing that you don't want to mess with in the Jewish faith. You don't want to mess with demons. Those are also the bad people. That's why they're in the Gentile area, right? That's the bad people over there. But then it's not worse. Where did he live? He lived in the tombs. He lived in a cemetery. That is one of the most unclean places around for Jews anyway. They literally whitewash, constantly whitewashing their markers of the dead so that people do not accidentally rub up against them because they're so afraid that death or those demons will latch on to them as well. So that's another thing that's going on in the story. And then to make matters worse of all is the last part that's in the story, or the presence of pigs, right? It's the forbidden white meat of the Jews. That goes back to the book of Leviticus. Those are the most filthiest creatures on the face of the earth, and you're to avoid them at all cost. So this story just screams and it shouts of reasons not to follow through with going to this place. It's a crazy place. There are crazy men. There are crazy demons. There's crazy pigs. It's not a place for any one of us to go. It is a place we tell our children, stay away from there. Do not enter that area. But here's the problem. It is the exact place where we find the leader of our faith. Doesn't that sound strange to you? Why would Jesus go to a place like this? We got to come up with some reason, right? Well, the Jews did. He's just crazy too. He's one of those demon leaders who's trying to go out and cast out demons himself. They don't know how to deal with it. So what do? They try to get rid of him because this guy is not safe. This guy has lost his marbles. This guy does not know what he is doing. What do we do with that? God is demonstrating through the acts of Jesus that God cares about those outside the church. And God encourages us, moves us to engage ourselves with those outside the church as much as we engage with those within the church as well. And that is not an easy task to do, obviously, because this story tells us that there's a plenty of reasons for us not to cross into those territories, to avoid such outsiders at all costs, because we don't know how to deal with them. But the point is that what we tend to fear, Jesus faces. What we steer away from, Jesus confronts. What we try to avoid at all costs, Jesus heals. What we think may harm us, he finds the power to overcome. Faith is seen in people what God sees in people. That's God's child. Faith reminds us that the good news of Jesus Christ is not for us to keep for ourselves and consume, but it's for us to share with the world around us. And so faith requires that we have to overcome those fears, that we have to overcome our ignorance until we see what Jesus sees in us, so that we can go and do what Jesus did. And you know what you call 2 or 3 people who do just this? It's what you call church. It's what you call church. You know, the last couple of Christmases, you know, we've done something a little different. We've kind of tried to challenge ourselves to evaluate how we do Christmas, right? And we thought about asking a simple question, and the question was this: if Christmas is Jesus' birthday, what does Jesus really want for his birthday? So instead of trying to overspend on gifts for people who have everything and need very little, what if we took that portion of that money and put that into some kind of a project to give it to folks or to people or to a need that would satisfy Jesus? And you simply write a card to, like my dad, and say, you know, instead of that tie you'll just throw in your closet or give to Goodwill, I've taken that $3. That's where I got it from. And I'm going to put it into a fund that helps feed hungry people. And so that's one thing we're going to try to do this year. Our Christmas project we're going to do is to help those folks who our church helps in their times of need. Every month we have just a small portion of funds. We call it a small portion because it disappears by the 5th of the month, to help people with electric bills, gas bill, gasoline for the cars, those different types of things. We give help with them on small projects. This year, we don't want to turn anybody away, because for 25 days we turn people away. And this is Christmas, right? And we shouldn't have to turn people away. We've already had 2 families approach us about helping them with Christmas. Great, we can do that. And so what we want to do, like the last couple of years, we've raised on the average about $22,000 for the month to do other projects within the community. We want to kind of earmark that as well, and to take that money and to give it back into the people who say, this has been a hard month for me, can you help? We do not want to turn anybody away who needs help, regardless of their situation. And so that's something we want to try to do. So we're going to be doing that again, and you'll hear more about that in the newsletter. We'll send out letters out from the church on the internet and be on the website, so pay attention to all those different types of things so that we can give our funds this Christmas to those who need it most, as in response to those that we love dearly in their name. And so pay attention to that, because Christmas is upon us. And so that's one thing we're going to be doing, to think about those who are in great need. That's part of our responsibility. So as we think through the healing stories, if we can help out with the healing, this is just one small way, but let's reflect on these words as well.